Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching TV Asia, and I'm your host, Shoaib Zaidi. Yes, it's a Tuesday, 4:05 p.m. from Queensland time. We are starting our current affairs show, Current Affair with Dr. Bernard Malik and Professor Pitman. If you remember last week, we discussed more about how the international student going to arrive, and we did not discuss more about the COVID. And today we swap our topics, and we would like to discuss more about the COVID, especially in India and around the world, and would like to see how the COVID vaccine is going to be distributed or rolled out in Australia. Ultimately, we have two our expert opinion, our experts analyst, and Mr. Bernard Malik. He's our expert analyst and Professor Pitman. Let's start the show with the Dr. Bernard Malik. Dr. Bernard Malik, sir. Last week we discussed about the COVID in India, but we did not conclude it very well. How the COVID in India is at this stage?
So, COVID in India is still, compared to Australia and other places, a big threat.
Right.
We have had 28.9 million cases and 349,000 reported deaths.
Right.
Given these numbers, it would be a scary situation for any country for that matter. But considering where India has been and to where it has come, yes, we have gained a lot of control in this. Different states are opening gradually back to normal. And Delhi, which was hit badly during the COVID, in fact, Delhi was the first one to be highlighted after Mumbai, is gradually opening now. The chief minister there has done a very good job. And now it's much easy to find a bed, unlike the situation a month ago when you couldn't find a bed, you couldn't find oxygen. Because numbers have gone down, treatment is easily available.
Dr. Bernard, situation is coming better. This is the conclusion we have for us as well as from the rest of the world. But now coming back, the policies, the arrangements, the resources, what exactly is happening? Where is the positive moves was observed or positive decision has been taken? Those helping at this stage.
I think with the second wave, most politicians, state premiers, the chief ministers, the prime minister himself were given a rude shock as to their preparedness.
Right.
And as we have learned the lessons, there has been so much bad publicity. They try to bury the news. They try to control media. Now you don't see any news. If you Google today, COVID cases in India, you won't find any Indian channels giving it. You'll find Australian channels and other channels giving it. So government went out and oppressed the news, but at the same time, second wave has gone down. It's trying to go down. But they're talking third wave already. And they're preparing at the moment for the third wave. And I was reading some of the figures that third wave in most countries has done 25% more damage than the second wave.
Right.
That happens in India, it would be disastrous because in the second wave, though the numbers are only 249,000 deaths, it's a joke. This is probably 10% of the real numbers or even less than that. All these people who have done ground study, all these people who have gone and taken the records from graveyards, from crematoriums, have found the numbers reported by the government. And some of these numbers were very drastically different, especially in Uttar Pradesh, where government was reporting 3 cases of deaths in teachers, and teacher union comes out and says, no, we have lost 649 people, and here are their names and numbers and times of death and the places where they died. So if you're going to look at those kind of figures, and it happens in the third wave happens to be 25% more than the second one, oh gosh, God have mercy on us. But I think government is too well prepared this time for the third wave. They're doing all they can do. They're trying to, all the state chief ministers now, they think you cannot leave it to the central government to fight for us. What they're trying to do is they're trying to have the bureaucrats work on figures and numbers, how to increase the capacity, anticipate the worst and prepare for the best.
Right. Mr. Malik, I will come back to you, and ultimately, we would like to know more about that for the third wave. The good results are occurred because of the good critics or because of the bad advisors of the government. So ultimately, because these advisors were earlier there in the first wave and second wave, what happened in the third wave? Does it is the result of the good critics, like people everywhere in part of the world, including you and any many people, they always discuss and discuss about what happening there. Maybe it's because of this or something else. I'll come back to you. I'd like to know more about and see from Professor Pitman about the Australia COVID. Professor Pitman, thank you very much, sir. Professor Pitman, you see again Victoria going for a COVID lockdown, and look like that it is going to be a life cycle, normal life cycle for us, for you, for me, for Dr. Bernard Malik, that we have to start operating our life with the presence of COVID and with the plan B, how to handle the COVID. Do you think it's happening like that?
Uh, the education minister, the federal government education minister, gave an address about 4 or 5 days ago, talking about education and international students and domestic students. And he made the point quite clear that it will be some years before Australia gets back to a standard process of education. So he made the point quite clear in his speech that we've got to get used to the change of dealing with COVID. And even here in Australia in the last week or so, I think we've just got a rude shock. And all of a sudden, thousands of Australians are going in now for their vaccination because of the Indian strain appearing down in Victoria. And I think what's happened in Victoria, people have got fatigued from being shut down regularly. So they've made a decision that they'd rather get vaccinated than to keep getting locked down all the time. And even here in Queensland, they've opened up 2 more vaccination hubs in the last couple of days, and there's queues outside wanting to get in. So, and the government, the federal government, has just started a new media campaign called "Get Your Shot," so that we can live normally and open our borders. And that all came out in the last few days. So I think Australia will take a big step forward in getting vaccinated over the next couple of months, which we had an apathy for because of the medical advice about the different vaccinations and blood clots. So a lot of people just sat back and didn't get vaccinated. So I think we've turned a corner here in Australia on vaccinations.
Okay, the public opinion is ultimately is quite different in the type of the vaccine, and the reason for this one, that some people has understanding that it is not yet tested fully, so it has a potential risk, and some people some already side effects already seen for some of the vaccine. Do you think that people are very right on their decision, because until unless they did not sure 100% about the side effect of the vaccine, they should not take the vaccine?
I think what you've just said is the obvious reason why they haven't. I get my first COVID shot on Friday, and I'm currently being treated for a heart complaint. So I'm not sure which vaccine they're going to give me. I'm assuming they will probably give me Pfizer because it's an anti-heart problem one. So it'll be interesting in my own case to see what they do. My brother just had his, and he's just slightly younger than me, and he had the AstraZeneca, and he said he had a sore arm for the day where the needle went in, but he was fine. I've got a great aunt who's 93 years of age, and she's saying, why worry about it? So there's all sorts of different views and opinions and mixed views, particularly about the blood clotting issue.
Yeah.
So I think Australians do have a bit of a concern raised by the media. But having said that, for the first time in the COVID vaccination rollout, there's been thousands queue in the last week to get the vaccination. So I think the fatigue may have overcome the fear factor.
Right. I will get back to you and find out that does this is another solution for the fatigue. Like as you already mentioned that in Victoria they get fatigued because of the start and lockdown. So ultimately, if we did not take the vaccine and if we did not understand the whole process, our whole system, whole life will going to be in the same way, lockdown or a start. I'll first let me go back to Mr. Bernard Malik. Mr. Bernard Malik, third waves, change in results, things are better, including that media has no access, but we believing, the heart says, because we believe that positive waves are coming and India is getting better. My question was earlier with you that it is because of the good critics or it and the situation get worse because of the bad advisors.
I'm sure everyone knows India is a parliamentary democracy, but at the moment it's being run like a presidential form of government. All the decisions are taken by the Prime Minister, and there is hardly anybody who has any say in the cabinet. Number two person is Mr. Amit Shah. Amit Shah was made in charge of COVID handling.
Right.
During such a poor job was done, his name never came up in the media anywhere. Then it remained up to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister stayed pretty much below radar. And then all these big media houses that have been bought out or patronized by the government. Please understand, in India, the government spends billions, not millions, but billions of dollars on advertisement.
Right.
All these advertisements are given to the channels that are beholden to the government. And so government is able to exert a lot of influence because they have the checkbook for these people to survive. If you do an audit of how much money is spent on advertisement, the publicity, and how much money was spent actually on COVID and capacity building, you would be shocked that perhaps they have spent more money on publicity than on increasing their capacities in the hospital. Having said that, still, I think because somebody died everywhere, there are a lot of people. There is not an Indian, especially in North, who doesn't know anybody close who died.
Right.
So death has almost hit every household that we know.
Right.
In terms of associated relations. And now government is feeling the heat. And now government is trying to take proactive steps. I hope the third wave doesn't come there, but if it does come, we are able to fight it and do well. That is very, very critical. You don't want more people dying. That is why the preparation is more stringent. It's more aggressive at the moment because the government everywhere. See, there is yesterday there was news that Prime Minister and his ministers were trying to prepare for election in Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh is one of the biggest states and has 81 MPs that are sent to the parliament. It used to be so that the first 4 or 5 prime ministers came from Uttar Pradesh,
right,
other than Prime Minister Modi, because Uttar Pradesh carried so much influence by sending in 80 people, and anywhere, it used to be 85 actually, anywhere they send 85 MPs, that party would form government. Having said that, now the election is coming there next year. And
right,
party in power is BJP. Because of BJP's poor performance in Uttar Pradesh and poor performance everywhere else, central government is so worried about, trying to make sure everything is hush-hush. So they are trying to have a lot of meetings to win that election. And now some of these objective media houses are saying, if we had done that much preparation for COVID, you would have less loss of death.
Absolutely.
There is election next year. And if third wave hits very close to second wave, it's not going to go well with the government. So government, for its own electoral victory reasons, would have to work harder and be better prepared.
And Dr. Malik, what is the status of the COVID vaccine in India?
India, it's very ironical that India is the largest producer of COVID vaccine. Absolutely, by far the largest producer. But unfortunately, when we prepared it in December, we didn't have many cases. So Prime Minister got on his high horse and went everywhere and said, oh, we'll send it to PNG, we'll send it to this country, we'll send it to that country, we'll send it everywhere else, and didn't care about vaccinating his own people. And when tragedy hit home, we didn't have many vaccines to give to our people. And then we had not developed infrastructure, a system where it could be dispensed so fast. India is still doing a very good job in terms of vaccinating its people. But you're looking at 1.3 billion people. So even if you successfully do 100 million or 200 million, it's way far from the target.
But I think God bless India. Definitely the things, as Mr. Malik says, that because of some good steps has been taken, and second part is that we are hoping that there should not be third wave in front of India. Otherwise, we don't know what will happen, and why we wish. And the fourth one is that the COVID vaccine, where the people find very positive, even though whatever the slow rate is not as per the India population, but it's still better. Coming back to Professor Grant. Professor Grant, we were just discussing about, you have mentioned about that fatigue response or fatigue in our life because of the COVID. So, and Victoria is one of them. Now, coming, if you see this, the current lockdown, that again they say that this is a string from India and coming from the travels. Do you think that traveler side, we still does not have the full measures, foolproof system where we are able to minimize or eliminate, not minimize, let's say eliminate the whole possibility of any passenger who is traveling in from any part of the world and should not transfer or should not bring COVID with it?
The issue in Victoria was somebody who was actually in a quarantine area who'd come from Sri Lanka, actually.
Sri Lanka.
It appears as though when he left, they gave him the all clear, but he didn't have the all clear. And of course, he went to different centres around Victoria. And as a result of that, he has infected others. And unfortunately, it's got into the nursing homes again. Again, the nursing home patients or clients haven't been vaccinated. So there's a significant outcry about it. And I think the Victorian government, a bit like the Indian government, may not get re-elected. They're in a political hot seat at the moment because of their inability to properly manage the quarantine, the restrictions, and the movement of the vaccinations rollout quickly enough. And the problem is that Victoria is a Labor government, the federal government is a Conservative government, and they are playing politics rather than getting on with the job. And I think that's the sad part about health, is health should not be a political issue. It should be for the betterment of people, humanity, and so on. It shouldn't be, we don't agree with your policy and I don't agree with yours. Even after they've come to a mutual agreement, they still disagree. And people's lives are affected because of personal and party ambitions. And I think that's a very sad indictment on the systems, not only here in Australia, saw it in America, see it in England, see it in India. It's worldwide, unfortunately.
Mr. Pitman, if let's say either dog is shaking the tail or tail is shaking the dog, but in this situation, let's assume for Victoria, state system is failed, to handle the COVID, and they blame that because we don't have the good resources from the federal. And federal says because you are not managing well, so it means you are failure. Do you think that in this situation there is a possibility that it will impact on the federal election also, or there will be no chances, because that's also nowadays it's part of our discussion that what's going to be happening in federal election. Victoria shutdown will going to make any effect or any impact on the federal election?
Oh, look, they're talking about a federal election maybe in November this year or March next year. I think the issue for the public is they need to understand how the Constitution works. A lot of people think that it's the federal government's job to do this or that, for example, health. But under the Constitution, they have a role in health, but they're not the managers of health. The state government control that under their constitutions. So the problem the Prime Minister has is explaining to the government that he's done all he can by providing finances and resources. The state government's constitution requires them to put it into action. And unfortunately, the public, depending on how the politics is played out, sometimes the Prime Minister is dragged into the issue. For example, the fires, he was blamed for not doing enough on the fires, when really it wasn't really his issue. It was the state government's. But because he was overseas and because it looked like weak leadership, he got dragged into the issue. On the health side, I think he's shown a much more positive approach to leadership in that area. And the dilemma he faces is if Labor can argue that he probably could have done more, they will have to argue from the Prime Minister's point of view that we did all we could. The problem was that the states took their time about implementing the strategies. So that's why I said it becomes a political game, and everybody's looking to blame each other or to use them as a scapegoat rather than getting on with the job. So I think the Prime Minister will probably get back in because he's done enough to show that he's leading the agenda. But having said that, some may see that they didn't do enough. So it'll be interesting to see which way the swinging voters will go.
Yeah, definitely, and we will bring some update before that show also. Either it's going to be in November or March, because we believe, and our viewers also believe, that Professor Pitman, he already knows the system, and Dr. Bernard Malik, they already know how the politics system does work, and it is possible to be predict by your experience. Dr. Bernard Malik, we are coming back to the international student, but we're still with the COVID. You know about the Victoria incident. The Victoria incident again is one of the chain who travel from anywhere part of the world. So it's something which happened there. So now, do you think that in this situation, the international students, if one student can lock the state, does it is possible that we can start this international flight while we are not able to sustain everything within the controlled boundaries? How we can go to open the flights and look after the many peoples?
See, it's a catch-22. You keep your borders locked. You do away not only with international students, with a lot of international trade. Your people are going to get fed up, not being able to travel outside. There are family ties abroad for a lot of Australians. Australia is an immigrant country, as Professor Pitman would say. He possibly came, his ancestors came 100 or 150 years ago, but there are fresh immigrants that have come whose ties to Europe are very strong, whose ties to India and subcontinent of Pakistan or China are very, very strong. They would like to travel. So keeping the borders closed is not an option. We have to find the best way to open them up. And I think the best way is, as Professor Pitman mentioned in the beginning, let's vaccinate everyone and open the country. At that time, please also understand, vaccination is not guaranteed for life. It will give you, it's still open to debate whether it keeps you safe for 3 months or 10 months for a year. There are cases where people who have been vaccinated got it. Now, what they're saying, vaccination is effective only up to 70 to 80%. There are 20% chance still you can get it. There are other ways when you were talking about herd immunity, that, okay, people got it, it will be fine. No, that is not working too. There are cases where people have gotten it second time. There is one unique case where the guy got it third time. So what we need to do is, one, we need to get a healthy population, vaccinate them, open the borders. You can't keep them shut indefinitely. This is a very, very small unit, the world. And you keep your border shut for 1 year, 2 years, it's not going to work. There will be some kind of impact, whether economic or social, on having closed borders. What they have to do now slowly is, yes, bring in students. You need students for one, for the money they bring. Second, for the help they come out and do. A lot of labor. You need skilled and unskilled labor here in this country. We have only 25 million people, which is absolutely the smallest number. You will not find any Indian state that has that much population. They're much bigger. I mean, I said it as a joke. There's some smaller states too. But all I'm trying to say is it's a very small country in terms of its population. If it is hard for us to manage that 25 million people and open our border, then God have mercy on us.
Mr. Malik, you mentioned about the vaccination. Okay, let's assume, let's see, because our role is just to see and try to find out some prediction also. Let's see that everyone is vaccinated. It's not possible, because some people, they by their own wish, they don't like to be vaccinated unless it become a law or legally required for travel or everything they have done. But the transmission from the international travel will remain a second part that need to be looked after. And that area, which I just mentioned earlier, that area we're still missing every time something happens from there.
Yes, I agree. I mean, as you said, one student can shut the whole state down, which is really, really very true. Because if you don't control the one, then you get more. So the only way to control it is you control the one, look at contact tracing, look at where the guy has been, isolate everybody else that they know, and try to control it. Some interesting figures while I was preparing for this program today, I came across Australia, in terms of international students, has the highest per capita numbers in terms of Australian population. There are 0.5% of Australian population. Nowhere in the world is that big number. So Australia has only 488,000 students, but it is, compared to its population, is a very big number.
Very big number.
Right? If the number is so big, how can you afford to ignore such a big export of the country? We live in Brisbane. Brisbane has one of the top universities in the world, University of Queensland, 35th university in the world. And India, the closest number that you can get is 350th ranking. IIT Kharagpur. So our countries are way behind. You won't find anything. And in this country, there are, I think, 6 universities that are within 100 top-ranked institutions in the world.
Right. I think Professor Pitman, Dr. Malik shared a very good stats, and there where he was explaining that around 480,000, more than 480,000 students in compared to the population. It's really a big number. So, and do you think that looking out from the government side, does the government is waiting? This government is waiting for the next government to make the move, or just trying to shift the monkey from one shoulder to other. Let's see, it's not my time. let's when new government will come, he will decide by this time because it's almost finishing the tenure. Do you think there is a possibility?
The Federal Minister for Education gave a talk several days ago, and the ship was sailing this way, now it's sailing that way.
Good.
And what he's actually saying is quite interesting, actually. He's claiming that there hasn't been a significant decrease in international students studying here. But what he's done is he's taken those onshore and added offshore online and said when you put the two together, the numbers haven't gone down. He's suggesting only 10%. Now, what I think the Australian government will do is they will bring them back on shore, but they're making a shift in requiring universities, including institutes that I look after, to look at more online services. He's using the British and American model, where the British have 58% of their international students online, whereas Australia only has 22%. But I think what you may see is a policy change in immigrants. And the British policy says that if you study at an English university, either online or onshore, then we will give you a job. And the policy, now I'm not sure, I haven't had a full read of it, talks about graduate positions here in Australia, and they're going to offer 30,000. Now, I don't know if that will include, and I think it does, international students who have studied here in Australia. So that's what UK, United Kingdom and America have done. So what you might see is a hybrid policy where you have students onshore, offshore, but your immigration policy will change. So instead of offering them just to come to Australia and get an education, they'll offer them a job for the nation and change their policy direction in that area. The other interesting development, and our institute recently patented with some other colleagues in India a product they'd like to develop. The federal government is changing its research policy at universities from research that produces publications to research that produces a commercial benefit for the community. In other words, Professor Harbinder Singh, who works for me, he's actually got a commercial product that can come out of the research. And the government now wants the universities not just to produce papers for publications, they want economic benefits out of it. And they're talking about paying for commercialization of research as against publication. Now that may change our big universities' approach in the future, who have published hundreds and hundreds of papers, but produce nothing more than a lot more paper, to actually producing things like vaccinations and vaccines for coronavirus. So there's a policy shift occurring in Australia, which may be interesting to watch over the next 12 months or so.
Dr. Malik, policy shift in Australia. And look, if we are looking from the immigration side, let's have a real-time picture. We have a limited immigrants arrival since last 12 months, and international student is not there, so nobody is available for doing the jobs what you mentioned. Do you find, and it will go back to you, and then I will go back to Professor Pitman also, did you find that immigration policy has any change because they don't have the workmen available? So the criteria which they normally keep for the most of the professions for getting the permanent residency has been reduced because of the current situation is that we don't have the people available. Let's go down and revise it and make it softer policy. Do you think it happened?
I think we live in a very, very versatile country. We are blessed to be living in Australia, considering what experience people have had in their countries during COVID, including US, where I come from, and India, where I belong to. Both the countries have suffered massively. And that's a story with every country in Europe. England, Italy, Spain, Argentina, you name it, they suffered it. Over here, we have done so well. That is because our ministers are very switched on. They make changes quickly. I'm not sure if you're aware that 2 weeks ago they changed the immigration policy on student work. Students can work now unlimited hours if they're working in hospitality industry or if they're working in aged care. That reflects how hands-on these people are.
Good.
Run the country whatever it takes, and they will run in the best way and most envious way in the world. So hats off to the government, whether it is Scott Morrison or the state governments. These people are the best people to govern.
Right, right. Professor Pitman, coming back to the same question again, because I know this is one side where we find that, okay, from our side, ultimately the policy has been changed. But and not me, I received a call and there was a question from this call also that they would like to see some kind of, the requirement for the permanent residency, the point scoring system, because it's going to be like accountants, they require their, 90 points or 80 points. However, when it is started, it was started with the 60 points. So when you don't have the manpower and looking supply and demand formula, do you think it's a good time to reduce and let's cop up those people? Those are available and they are on the temporary visa, or they call it the time when you are looking for work, PR kind of visas. Do you think that there is still more need to have a revision on the immigration policy, especially for permanent residents, immigrants, and they have the education, they already completed their education?
I like the British policy and the American and Canadian policy, where they offer jobs to people who have studied here and are graduates of our universities. I think that's an excellent policy. The dilemma at the moment is, and I have some people working for me from India and from other countries who are on visas still, wanting to get immigration here, but they can't get a job. Although they're university qualified, they can't get a job in their industry. And I don't know if that's a language issue or a cultural issue, or if it's just a problem with the policy because they tell their employer that they're on a visa, and the employer automatically knows that's only for a couple of years and I want to employ someone for 20, 30, 40 years.
Mm.
So I think that's a problem that they've got to sort out. The other issue is, I think they've really got to create an industry for migrants with education. In my street, I have 4 or 5 Indian doctors. But when it comes to other things like accounting and those things, they don't seem to be able to get the jobs. Australia is happy to accept the medical practitioners and the specialists, but not the other types of jobs in Australia. And if they move more to a graduate job opportunity so that there are 50, 60, 100,000 jobs every year for educated people here, I can't see a reason why Indian people who generally speak reasonably good English can't pick up those jobs. And they should be able to pick them up because they've studied here, they're used to the Australian experience at universities. The other interesting thing is the minister turned around and said to the big universities in Australia, your job is to educate domestic students, not to be go chasing international students. Now, people like Dr. Bernard, who's interested in education at different levels of tertiary education, that may expand his opportunities to grow his industry more and more, because he can have students come here, study in the fields that they want to study at his institutes, and then get a job immediately because they're a graduate of an Australian institute, and they don't have to deal with the big universities who really have a lot of government money, but they deal with them, and what they're suggesting, deal with those unis on the research commercialisation area. A lot of Indians are in the medical research area, and they're producing money for Australia. And I think that's what they're going to do, is get them into the research with the big universities, but let the big universities look after domestic, have the smaller universities and institute bring in the international and move them into the research area. I think that's where the policy shift will occur over the next year or two.
Right. Dr. Bernard, ultimately, we will going to have a discussion on this one. My last question of the day with you, which is again a difficult one, and I find out that difficult question with Dr. Bernard Malik make the softer and easiest answer. Dr. Bernard Malik, in last show, Professor Pitman has mentioned and he referred Canada. He says in Canada, when they are entertaining or welcoming a student, they are welcoming with the mindset that you are going to part of the nation, because they did not ask a lot of queries about, okay, how you are going to back, what is your plan when you are going to back. Every time when you come to Australia, these questions asked many times, what is your strategy while you are going back. In Canada or other countries where they are really looking at good students, we need also in Australia also, but they are trying to show them that you are important, and we would like to give you opportunity to have your good education. You are paying for your education, and then we will try to give you opportunity to be a part of our system, serve our country. In this practice, what happens, the best mind from all countries coming and serving the best countries. In Australia, people are coming with the best minds are coming, but they always has a fear. They always has, and then they start doing sometimes wrong or right, whatever is possibly just to stay there, because they spend a lot of money. They would like to be a part of the system. They love the system. Do you think that they have to look from that side? It is important that there is some countries, they're already doing it, that there is a value for the international student. And when they stay, they become more better, productive people and good citizens also.
You're talking two different countries when it comes to immigration. In Australia, until 1965, it was a very closed country. They used to have only white policy. So they
Right.
was coming only from white countries. So they
Yeah.
opened up very recently. If you look at Canada, Canada opened it. If you remember, I don't know whether you studied or not. We studied in our Punjabi lesson, a gentleman called Kama Katla Maru Jahaj. So Indian immigrants went there probably over 125 years ago.
Right.
A shipload of people, they went there and they started living. Australia is, again, very cautious. Sometimes I feel it's overcautious. I can give you example of so many countries that have lived in or have contacts in different countries. In US, you will go around and see, wow, this and take an example of Indian immigrants, that they're very successful there. The richest ethnic community in US is Indians. And if you're going on the road, they will ask you, oh, if you dressed reasonably okay, they will ask you, okay, Mr. Zaidi, are you a doctor? And you say, no, I'm not a doctor. They'll say, oh, okay. Then you must be an engineer. You say, no, I'm not an engineer. You must have Hilton. And you say, no, I don't know Hilton. They will go up to 7-Eleven to make sure that either you are a very high-fly, very successful doctor or engineer or a professor, or you're a businessman. That's a perception that has been created because they welcomed quality immigration there.
Right.
They were the ones that came up with H-1B visa. That was highly skilled immigration that came. In Australia, when I came, interestingly, I had a PhD from US. It was very difficult for me to get immigration here. I even had, through friends, I approached the Minister of Small Business, Eric Emerson, who later became the Education Minister too, in Julia Gillard's government. I had one-to-one meeting with him. And he said, look, I'm sorry, it's easy for us here. And interestingly, at that time, I was the head of this college. I was signing off diploma of management and people were getting PR when I didn't have a PR. So we need to look at the immigration standards that we have here. Secondly, only in this country, you will find that the rules change because of the date and not because of the need. If you talk to any student, you talk to any immigration official, you talk to any immigration agent or immigration lawyer, they will tell you that, oh, on 1st of March, the rules change, 1st of July, the rules change. And then they're fixed dates. I had a discussion with the Minister Peter Dutton. He was immigration minister. I said, sir, I lived in US and I went in 1993. We used to have a visa called F1 visa for student. I got F1 visa that time in 1993. Today, you go there, you still get F1 visa because they never changed the visa. But I came here in 2009, we used to have 572, 570, 571, 572, 573, 574, 75. Oh gosh, these were all student visa categories. And then they changed it. Now they've been changed 3 times. Only in this country, we change the law on immigration based on date and not based on need. And then the minister said, that's interesting. I never thought about it. So what we are trying to do is we are over-conscious, and sometimes we are our over-cautious approach towards immigration can be unhealthy. But for Australia, this system has worked very well. Whatever they have done well. It's a very successful country. So I do not know if they need to really fix something that is not broken.
Marisa, ultimately, the time is over. We will discuss this topic, and this topic has really, we have a few incidents also. If we need, we can bring the people in the show and they can share their stories that they have really good education. They've done lots of, non-standard jobs while they're having a good future in their own country, but they did not find a good place there. And I think until unless we don't have realized a really easy immigration policy, as Professor Pitman mentioned, or Dr. Malik mentioned, for other countries, they have more than 100 years. Ultimately, it will show the difference, because when we see the mirror, then we were going to see that one. But the important news is that next week, I have a very important topic for my both analysts. And again, as I told you, our show is not a fabricated show. We're always having a clear topic, honest and transparent system to give a transparent, and there is no politics, but we discuss about the politics. Okay, our topic will be that is there any way that someone can get the PR after getting the border open if he is studying online, and this online study with a complete fees? It is possibly that he can get the PR? Does any education is still there that helps that, okay, you can do your education, finish, and when you finish, you come back, and then when the border open, you can get the PR? We would like